You know that feeling? You see the headlines, they're all screaming about how the economy's booming, but then you look around, you look at your own wallet, your community, and you just think, something's not right. Something just doesn't add up. Well, that feeling, that's exactly what we're diving into today. This growing gap between the numbers we're told and the reality we all feel. For decades, right? We've had this one big number to rule them all, gross domestic product, or GDP. It's been the ultimate scorecard for how a country is doing. But what if that scorecard is kind of broken? What if it's not even counting the most important plays in the game? That's the big question here.
And boom, here it is, laid out plain as day. You see that top line? That's GDP, just chugging along, always going up. We're told that means the economy is great. But then you look at the other line, real wages, how people are actually feeling, and it's just flat, or even going down. So it's not just a hunch, right? It's a huge red flag that maybe, just maybe, the main way we measure success is totally misleading us.
Okay, so if GDP isn't cutting it, what's the alternative? Well, that's where this new idea comes in. It's called the Composite Productivity Score, or CPS for short. And the whole point of it is to stop looking at just the big, shiny GDP number, and instead to actually look inside of it, to figure out the real health and the real productive power of an economy.
So the whole thing is built on this really simple but kind of revolutionary idea. Not all money is the same. I mean, think about it. A dollar that goes into building a brand new factory, one that's going to provide good jobs for decades, that's totally different from a dollar that's made by just, flipping a house for a quick buck. The CPS is basically a tool to tell us which kind of activity is really driving the economy. All right, so the CPS is made up of a few different parts. First up, we've got something called the F score. The F stands for fungibility. And all that really means is, how flexible is an economy? How easily can you take a country's assets, its stuff, and move it around, trade it, or use it for something new and productive? So let's break down how that F score works. You can see here things that are super flexible, like tech or intellectual property. They get a full point. A factory, which is productive but kind of stuck in one place, gets some credit. But, and this is the kicker, look at the bottom. Speculative real estate, all that financial churning, gets a big fat 0. So when a housing bubble makes GDP look amazing, the CPS says, nope, that didn't add a single thing to our actual productive power. That money is just stuck.
Okay, next up is the second piece of the puzzle, the productive investment ratio, or PI ratio. And this one is super simple, but really, really powerful. It just asks one question. Is a country actually investing in its future, or is it just, spending for today?
Basically, the PI ratio splits all the spending in an economy into 4 buckets. You've got Category A, building stuff that expands our capabilities, like new infrastructure or R&D. That's the best. Then Category B, investing in people, education, healthcare. Also great. Category C is just pure consumption, buying stuff. It's fine, it's neutral. But then you get to Category D. This is the wild part. Stuff like speculative finance gets a negative score. This framework says that kind of activity doesn't just do nothing, it actively hurts the economy's real health. So when you look at the formula here, you can see it's not just adding things up. It's deliberately designed to give a big thumbs up to productive investment and to actively punish those extractive things that can literally act like a dead weight on the whole system. All right, the third metric is called the U rate for utilization. And this one is a massive reality check. I mean, think about it. It's one thing to build a fancy new factory or a super fast train, but the real question is anyone actually using it? Because a country can be full of empty airports and ghost cities. And while that might look like investment, the U rate says, nope, that's just stuff sitting there, collecting dust. It measures what's actually being used versus what's just idle. And finally, the last piece is the R index, R for resilience. This is all about looking under the hood and asking, how tough is this economy really? How easily could it all fall apart? Is it too dependent on just one industry? Are its supply chains super fragile? And a huge one, how much of this growth is just built on a mountain of debt? An economy can look great on paper, but actually be a total house of cards. This R index is designed to find those weak spots before the whole thing collapses. So you take those 4 things we just talked about, fungibility, productive investment, utilization, and resilience, you crunch them all together, and out pops one single number, the composite productivity score. And what you get is a much, much richer and more honest picture of an economy's health than GDP could ever give us. Okay, so this is where it gets really, really interesting.
The folks behind this framework took this new tool and pointed it at the two biggest economic engines on the planet, the USA and China. So let's see what they found. First up, the United States. For 2024, its composite productivity score is 0.34. Now, remember, a perfect score would be 1.0. So 0.34, that's surprisingly low. Really low, actually. Now, what about China? For 2024, its score is 0.44. So yeah, that's higher than the US, but it's still telling us that well over half of the activity in its economy isn't actually creating sustainable productive value. So what on earth is going on here? Why are these numbers what they are? Okay, so let's dig into that US score. Why so low? Well, a huge piece of the answer is right here. A staggering 58% of the entire economy is classified as that extractive, non-fungible stuff we talked about. We're talking about a massive real estate sector and a whole lot of financial activity that, from this point of view, isn't creating new stuff. It's just moving money around and locking up capital.
And if you want a stat to really make your head spin, here it is. In the US, the financial sector is about 3 times larger than the part of it that actually lends money to build new productive businesses. Think about that. 3 times more activity just shuffling existing wealth around than creating new wealth. That is like the definition of a rentier economy.
Now let's flip over to China, and whoa, it is a completely different story. A whopping 30% of their entire economy goes into that Category A bucket, capability expansion. They are building infrastructure, factories, tech at a scale that is just mind-boggling. And that's exactly why their PI ratio is so much higher.
But there's always a catch, isn't there? This is the flip side of all that insane building, a really low utilization rate. China has built so much, so incredibly fast, that huge chunks of it are just sitting empty. We've all seen the pictures of the so-called ghost cities. This is a classic case of what the source calls massive capital misallocation. You're building just to build, which, yeah, it pumps up your GDP numbers, but it tanks your real useful productivity score.
So what we're left with are these two economic giants with almost perfectly opposite problems. It's like they're mirror images. In the US, the big issue is underinvestment and too much rent extraction. In China, it's the exact opposite, overinvestment and putting that money in the wrong places. Two totally different paths, but they both end up with a lower quality economy.
All right, let's wrap this up. What's the real bottom line here? When you step back and look at all this, what's the big takeaway? And honestly, this chart might be the single most important one we look at today. Between 2010 and 2024, both the US and China saw their GDPs go through the roof. But, and this is the crazy part, during that exact same time, the quality of their economies, measured by the CPS, went down. The US score dropped 21%, and China's dropped 15%. So yes, they were getting bigger, but the growth itself was getting sicker and less sustainable. It really all comes back to that one core idea we started with. It's so simple, but so powerful. Not all GDP is created equal. The money made from building a new cutting-edge factory is just not the same as the money made from a speculative housing bubble. One is actually building a future, the other is just inflating a bubble in the present. And so that leaves us with a pretty huge question, doesn't it? If the one big number we've been trusting for almost 100 years is giving us a warped view of reality, then how should we be measuring progress? What kind of scorecard would actually tell us if we're on the right track, if we're building a future that's actually better, stronger, and more prosperous for everyone?